If you settle your baby or toddler at bedtime only for them to wake up less than 2 hours later, then you're familiar with false starts. False starts happen when babies or toddlers don't begin their nights with a long stretch of deep sleep. They may have this long stretch of deep sleep later in the night, or maybe not at all. Well, today we unpack why false starts happen and how you can fix them. Welcome back to Brand New Little People, the podcast companion to the Sunbell Pediatric Sleep Clinic programs created by us. I'm Dr. Fallon Cook, and I'm here with Dr. Laura Conway, and we're the directors of Infant Sleep Australia. Laura, let's dive straight in. How common do you reckon it is to see babies or toddlers in the clinic that are having false starts?
It's super common. Most sleep diaries that I see will have
Mm,
false starts logged. Not necessarily every day, but a number of times a week and sometimes every day. And
mm,
what often happens is that when I get a sleep diary through for follow up appointments, those false starts have usually disappeared. So they are relatively straightforward to resolve,
yeah.
which is excellent. And parents are usually delighted because it means that they've got their evenings back. They can pop their little one
Yes.
down and then they can actually know that their little one is down.
It
And they
makes
can then,
such a difference, doesn't it? Like when you've been parenting all day, you just want to know that when they go to sleep, it sticks for a while
yes,
so that you can I don't even know. Like, I don't even go and watch Netflix anymore. I'm just like, I just need time for me to think. Like, yeah,
yeah,
it's so
just
important
sit
for
and
parent well-being.
absolutely. So, Fallon,
Mm.
why don't you let us know why false starts happen?
Yeah, so false starts almost always indicate that there's something off with the daily rhythm because
Mm,
a well functioning circadian rhythm will prioritize having, 3 to 4 hours of pretty deep, uninterrupted sleep at the beginning of the night. I often joke to
mm.
families it's the sort of sleep where a tornado could pass by and your baby or your toddler is just completely oblivious. Like they are
Yeah.
really down because usually we do start the night with this deep sleep before we start to really cycle up and down, between sleep cycles. So
Mm,
it is a good clue that something's a little out with the daily rhythm. Um, and it usually, when they're not starting the night with this deep sleep, it usually means that sleep pressure is just too low at the beginning of the night. And what can cause
yeah.
that are several factors. So it
Mm,
could be that the baby or toddler is just getting overall too much day sleep. So they're not
mm,
getting that buildup of high enough sleep pressure to really get into deep sleep. Sometimes they've just got too many naps going on. They really are ready to drop a nap.
mm,
And it's really time for it to happen. Or the naps can just be getting way too close to bedtime. So they're not awake long enough
mm,
before bed to build up that sleep pressure that's needed.
mm.
Um, so it really just comes down to not having that sleep pressure or sleep drive built up to the high enough level that they can really get into that deep sleep. But I will say there are exceptions, and I've had one of these in clinic lately. Very, very rare, but I do feel like there's the odd baby or toddler where sleep pressure seems like it's high enough. We're doing kind of all the
Mm.
right things, but there is, every now and then a baby or toddler who seems so exquisitely sensitive to how and where they fell asleep that
Mm.
no matter how high the sleep pressure is, if they were held to sleep or fed to sleep, they just keep pinging awake, really upset
Yes.
that they've been transferred over to their cot. So normally, I would say even in a baby who's only ever known, feeding to sleep, they will typically, if sleep pressure is where it needs to be, they start the night with a long stretch of deep sleep before they start to wake. But I think there are some exceptions. But overall, I would say to parents, look, it's generally going to come down to the daily rhythm and really figuring out how to work it best for your child. Um,
Mm.
but I think really important question, Laura, if parents are listening in and they're like, oh my gosh, false starts happen all the time in my little one, what can parents actually do about it? Talk us through.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's all very well and good me saying it's simple to resolve and they're not following up with how to do
Just
it.
tweak the daily rhythm. Parents are like, I'm too exhausted. How do I even know what to do? Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you are experiencing false starts with your little ones, the first thing I would do is check how many naps they are having each day, and is that appropriate for their age? So, let's say that your baby is 5 to 6 months old. and they're still having 4 naps a day, then I would say it's time to drop them down to 3 naps. Likewise, if they're 8 to 9 months old and they're still having 3 naps a day, and then they're having the false starts, it will be time to drop them down to 2 naps. And then we're thinking about those babies who are just venturing into toddlerhood, 12 months or older, having false starts. It is likely to be time to move them to the 1 nap a day. So that's
Mm,
thinking about the number of naps. Then the next thing to consider is how much day sleep they are getting and how much out of their overall sleep need that is. So if they have a 13-hour sleep need and they're having 4 or 5 hours worth of daytime sleep, it's pretty likely that they're having a little bit too much and they can't build the sleep pressure up high enough before bed. So you may need to reduce the duration of some of their naps and push more sleep into the nighttime. And the
mm,
final thing to consider would be how long do they have between waking up from their final nap and going down for the start of the night? Now, that is usually the longest period of time that your baby will be awake in the day. So, if your baby is 4 months old, maybe they can manage an hour and a half to 2 hours awake before they go down for the first nap. But before bedtime, that wake time might be 2.5 or 3 hours, for example, and it will be much
mm.
longer then for older babies. So just make sure that that last wake window is the longest one to give them enough time to build that sleep pressure high enough to help resolve that false start that they're having at the
Mm.
start of the night.
I think that's a really common problem actually, is I see a lot of parents who are like, oh, they're awake a really long time before bed. Like, they're 7 months old and they're awake for 3 hours before bed. And I'm like, no, that's fine. That's
Yes,
completely normal. In fact, I'd say that's kind of a minimum amount of time we want
yes.
awake before bed. And then the other thing I see parents get tripped up on is they're like, "Oh, no, we have to have a nap quite late in the day because in the lead up to bedtime, they're getting quite cranky and grumpy and, they're just not really that
Mm,
happy." And I'm like, "That's what we want. That's normal." Like, all
yes.
babies, all toddlers are cranky in the evening, and I think some parents don't realize how normal that is to be cranky and worn out by the end of the day, and if their baby isn't perfectly settled and happy, they go, oh my gosh, we've got to have a nap later in the day so they can be
Mm,
happy up to bedtime. But get used to it because toddlers, especially, they are cranky at the end of the day. They're hard to deal with. They can get upset over minor things. They're really running out of steam. It doesn't
yes.
mean you need to add a nap late in the day. Um,
No.
that's
And in
actually
actual
normal and a good
fact,
sign. Mm.
yes. No, and in actual fact, I was going to say, Fallon, that they um, then go to bed. They can't get into their deep restorative sleep easily. They're having sometimes
Mm.
multiple false starts where they spring awake after half an hour and then half an hour later and then half an hour later, and everyone's pulling
Yeah.
their hair out. Whereas if you actually just kind of condense all of those wake ups and push that bedtime a little bit later so that they are having a bit
Mm.
longer before the start of the night, then they get into their restorative sleep much sooner. And then you'll find that over a few days, that level of crankiness at the end of the night, it won't go altogether because we're all a bit tired and cranky before we go to
Mm.
bed, but it won't be as bad. So you can kind of get
Yeah,
off that
exactly.
treadmill that you're experiencing.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. It can be challenging, definitely. Look, I hope that's helpful if you're struggling with false starts. And a special thank you to Michaela, who reached out on Instagram and actually asked us for this episode on false starts because they are really common. And look,
Yeah.
I mean, we say they're simple to fix; they're pretty quick to fix. But
Hmm.
sometimes, especially when we've got babies that have unusual sleep needs, really high or really low, it can be really tricky to navigate what a good daily rhythm actually should look like. So,
Mm,
if you're a Sonbell member, you would already know that the unique sleep needs chapter is absolutely the place to go to build out the perfect daily rhythm that really works
mm,
for your little one. So, that would be my start point. And if you're still having trouble, please book in for a coaching call because often these sorts of daily rhythm issues are fixed so quickly. Laura and I
mm.
and the rest of our practitioner team, we can take one look at a sleep diary and just know. We just know
Yes.
instantly what we need to do. It's a
Yeah.
finely honed skill after all of these years. So
Yes.
usually it is, pretty quick to get these sorts of things back on track. And of course, if you're not a member of Sombal, but you're wanting extra support and maybe you want to work more one on one, book an initial appointment in our clinic. And then
Mm.
whoever you work with, whether it's Laura or one of our practitioner team, they'll do that full sleep diary assessment. They'll remove all the guesswork. And I think that's what parents
Yes.
want. They often come to coaching calls, I know, and they'll be like, I'm second guessing myself and I just want someone to say, right, this is the daily rhythm to follow.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a relief when you walk away from an appointment with a really clear plan. So yeah, that support is there if you are having a really tricky time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, excellent. All right, well, let's dive into parent questions because there's quite a
Mhm.
few this week, and I know that some of them do involve false starts. In fact, I think this first one might. So
Mm.
let's dive in. We've got an email here from Kate, who has a 7.5-month-old who wakes around 5 times overnight. Wow,
Mm.
often every
Mhm.
2 hours, and with more frequent waking towards morning and occasional false starts. I was right. This
Yeah.
is a false
Yeah.
starts one. Kate currently resettles him overnight with feeds or cuddles. He totals around 12.5 hours of sleep per 24 hours, with 2 to 2.5 hours of day sleep. Most days follow a two-nap rhythm around 9 to 9:30 a.m. and 1 to 2:30 p.m., with a
Mm.
third nap added if the second nap is a short one.
Mhm.
On two nap days, his last wake window can stretch to 4.5 to 5.5 hours, with a 7 p.m. bedtime and a 6 a.m. wake up. He's currently in the 3 to 2 nap transition, and his rhythm has recently become quite inconsistent. Kate
Mm.
wants to know whether the frequent night waking could be related to sleep pressure, whether adjustments to day sleep or wake windows are needed, and whether transitioning to two naps at this age may be too early.
Ah,
What do we reckon?
okay. Kate, transitioning to 2 naps consistently at this age is really highly likely to resolve those false starts and those more frequent wakes that your little one is having towards morning. It's highly likely there's a sleep pressure issue going on here. If we're thinking about 2 hours worth of daytime sleep, that leaves about 10 hours for overnight sleep. Given that he's got a 12-hour sleep need, or 12 and a half hour. Yeah. So maybe 2.5 hours of day sleep, and then that leaves 10 hours overnight, plus a little bit extra for feeds. So that means that your 7:30 to 6 a.m. wake up would be about right. So well done. You've got the nighttime looking well. Um, I would be dropping that third nap. Prepare for a few cranky days as your baby's circadian rhythm adjusts, like we just spoke about. But as the nights improve, so should his daytime mood. And being awake
Mm.
for 4.5 hours before the start of the night, absolutely fine at this age. Kate, your baby might be closer to 8 months now, depending on when you emailed this question through. And having longer awake before the start of the night is just something that happens as babies move towards dropping down to one nap once
Mm.
he's around 12 months of age. So yeah, be brave,
Yeah.
make that transition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Yeah,
you have
you've got
anything
this,
to add?
Kate. Well, if the night wakes still are hanging around, I would just say it's time to work on cot settling. I think Kate mentioned she's
Mm,
resettling overnight with feeds or cuddles. If you're feeding or
yeah.
cuddling all the way back to sleep, that might be causing him to keep waking
Yes.
overnight. So you might need to dive into that a little bit if things aren't resolving. But yeah, good
Yeah.
luck, Kate. You've got this.
Yay. Now, Katie has emailed. She has a nearly 17-month-old with a sleep need of 11 hours and 45 minutes. She follows a usual routine of an 8 p.m. bedtime, 6:45 wake up, and a 1 hour nap. Occasionally, the nap is only around 20 minutes, often when her daughter falls asleep in the car and doesn't transfer well. Yeah, that can be really tricky and frustrating when that happens. And on those
Mm.
days, Katie has tried resettling multiple times, but without success. And by 5 o'clock, her daughter becomes very tired and cranky, struggles eating dinner, and sometimes wakes overnight hungry. So Katie asks whether she can bring bedtime forward to around 7:20, 7:30 on those short nap days, or whether it's better to push through to the usual 8 p.m. What do you reckon?
I love this question, Katie. Look,
Mm,
I would say if you're really keen to keep a longer day nap, then aim as best you can to keep bedtime where it is so that you are really teaching your child's circadian rhythm that a short nap is really not ideal because we're not going to be able to catch up with a super early bedtime. And often that really helps them to really settle into a longer nap. Of course, that can be a bit tricky if, you've got to get them in and out of the car. And sometimes they're just like, oh no,
mm.
my 20-minute kick took the edge off. I'm not going back to sleep. But it might just be for a little while. We just have to work really hard not to do trips at nap time or to do trips at nap time, but then just wait in the car until she's finished her nap.
Yes.
We've all done that many times before.
Yes,
We
we
sit there with
have.
the engine idling, hoping that they stay asleep. Would you add
Yes.
anything to that one, Laura?
No, other than if she's absolutely exhausted, then potentially bring the bedtime 15 minutes earlier. If everyone
Mm,
is just over it, that is not going to do a whole lot of difference at this time. And yeah, it's a case of waiting it out. It may be that given that your daughter has quite a low sleep need, Katie, that you've only got another few months left of her having a nap at all.
mm,
So this can be a potential sign um, that nap days will be behind you soon. But no, good luck,
mm.
Katie. I would be
Yeah.
having some snacks or a coffee in the car and enjoying that bit of quiet time, idling
Yes.
in the driveway to help her have that full hour nap on those days.
Yeah, I like that plan. All
Mm.
right. Adrienne wrote in,
Mhm.
and she has a 15-month-old with an approximate 12-hour sleep need. He naps from around 11:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., goes to
Mhm.
bed at 7 p.m., typically sleeping well until about 3 or 4 a.m. when
Mm.
Adrienne brings him into the parental bed until around 6:30 a.m. He resettles independently earlier in the night. Adrienne wants to know whether bringing him into bed in the early morning hours has created a habit, whether she should persist with resettling him in the cot instead, and whether his sleep needs should be reassessed.
Hmm. Whenever sleep gets wobbly, I think it's a really good idea to reassess sleep needs. So, for anyone listening to this, if things have been going swimmingly and then they're getting wobbly and you're experiencing something like Adrienne describes, just log their sleep again for a week just to see if their sleep needs have changed. And then make any adjustments to the daily rhythm that you need to. So it might be that bedtime might need to move a little bit later or wake up a bit earlier if Adrian, your baby's sleep needs have dropped. If you want to stop the co-sleeping from 3 or 4 a.m., which I'm assuming you do, because that's what you've written in saying that you'd like to stop, then yes, it may well be best that you do move wake up to 6 a.m., which could be more achievable for him, as that will be about 11 hours overnight. And then the 1 hour nap takes it to 12. And you said that he's got a 12-hour sleep need. And after a few days of doing that, where the sleep pressure gets a bit higher by bedtime, then I would stop bringing him into bed with you if he continues to wake up. There's a good chance after a few days he may
Mm,
stop waking up because the sleep pressure will be high enough to get him through until 6 in the morning, rather than you trying to get to 6:30. But at this age, there is a chance that it's habit, that he's coming up into light sleep and going, I quite want to come in with mum.
yeah.
And then you'll need to make the decision that it's not happening anymore. Give him a big cuddle, sip of water, and then use whatever cot settling approach you want to, and stick with it until he goes back to sleep. Also, of course, check that there's nothing else waking him at that time, so he's not too cold and there's not noise going on outside that would be waking him. But I suspect it is probably habit. Be prepared for him to push back and be a
Mm,
bit cross that he's not coming into your bed anymore in the
yeah.
morning, but that's okay. It's perfectly reasonable to stop doing that. Um, Yeah,
Yeah,
so
and I think that's where approach really comes into it too, like, don't just randomly go, "Okay, it's 3 a.m. and I'm gonna resettle in the cot." Come up with a plan beforehand, decide exactly
oh,
how you're gonna
yes.
approach it so that you can be so incredibly consistent. Because when your toddler realizes, "Doesn't matter how cranky I get, mom or dad or my other caregiver is rock solid. They're here, they're supporting me, but they're just persisting with this repetitive calming reassurance." That's
Mm,
when they settle down quickly and kinda go, "Ugh, fine.
yes.
Fine, you seem really sure about this, mum. I'm going back to sleep." But it
Yeah,
definitely there will be some tricky moments, but stick to that daily rhythm even if it's a really tricky resettle. Stick to the daily
yes.
rhythm, get them up on time. That sleep pressure will build for the next night, and it will get easier, hopefully nice
Mm.
and quickly for you, Adrienne.
And avoid
Mm,
bringing him into your bed. If he really pushes back, that can really set you back, with toddlers.
yeah,
Yeah,
got good
so
memories at this age.
yeah, yeah, make sure that when you've made that decision, you stick with it, and then it's no more co-sleeping from then on. Yeah, good luck,
Yeah.
Adrian. We have an email from Anna, who has a 4.5-month-old who needs about 11 and a half hours per 24 hours. So a low sleep need bub here. He sleeps for around 2 hours across 3 daytime naps and sleeps between 9 and 9.5 hours overnight, waking twice for feeds and once for a nappy change. She puts him to bed between 8 and 8:30, with his last nap ending by 5 to 5:30 p.m. She has reduced night feeds to one at around midnight and one at 3 to 4 a.m., and usually resettles him in the cot for any other wakes. From 5 or 6 a.m., he wakes more frequently and becomes difficult to resettle, though. He refuses the dummy, and Anna often holds him from around 5:30 until that 6:45 wake up time, after which he's cranky and falls back asleep during a feed. So Anna wants to know whether this early morning pattern is habit driven, whether he may naturally want to wake up at this time, and whether introducing a settling approach such as the accelerated method would help. What do we
Mm.
reckon? There's a lot here.
Well, there is a lot here. So, Anna, I would be thinking with 2 hours total day sleep, he's probably looking for about 9.5 hours of sleep overnight. So, if he's
Mhm.
going to bed at about 8 p.m., it kind of makes sense that he's starting to get pretty wakeful by 5 a.m. because he's kind of met his quota. And
Mm,
often at that point, they are just kind of pretty dozy in your arms. And a lot of parents will say,
mm,
oh, they'll doze if I hold them. But if I try and transfer them to the cot, they spring awake.
mm,
So that's something to think about. I think I'd also be thinking of kind of building these cot settling skills as well. Sometimes when they're able to settle in their cot, they can add just a little bit more sleep to their 24 hours. So not all the
mm,
time, but sometimes as they start to be a bit more comfortable in their cot, we do see that they can manage a little bit more sleep. And then I think adjust bedtime as well. So there's an 11.5 hour sleep need you've reported. We want to allow a little bit more in the daily rhythm to allow for some night feeds at this age. But maybe with 2 hours total day sleep, having something like an 8:30 p.m. bedtime and a 6:30 a.m. wake up is a little bit
mm,
more realistic and achievable. So
mm,
work on that for a few days. We should see sleep pressure start to kind of build up. And then if you go all in with
mm.
working on some cot settling skills, kind of show him that we're going to persist with resettling in the cot until 6:30 a.m. or as close as you can get. Often then,
Yeah.
yeah, it all starts to really come together at that point. Have I missed anything with that one, Laura?
No, I don't think so. I think that's yeah, you've covered everything there. Um, you may find that you're better rested as well, Anna, if you're not spending that last hour holding him in your arms. I always get a
Mm,
little bit nervous when I read that parents are doing that in terms of parental mental health. Um,
yes.
yeah, that if you're up every day from 5:30 and feeling like you have to sit there really quietly and also stay awake for
Yeah.
over an hour, that's really going to take a toll on you, Anna. So it's don't feel guilty about wanting to address this and improve how long your little one sleeps for in the cot, for your well-being and also for your baby's
Mm.
safety.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a really good point because the risk of a SIDS incident definitely goes up when we're holding them at that time of the morning. It is really hard to stay awake. So, yeah, by resettling
Mm.
in the cot, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, good luck, Anna. We have
Mm.
a question sent in from Minnie, who has a 16-month-old who was previously sleeping through the night, but has recently started waking around 4 a.m. Minnie
Mm.
introduced a 100 ml bottle at this time and now wants to remove this association. He's also begun waking briefly at other points overnight, often sitting up and crying, but usually resettling
Mm.
independently. Minnie
Mhm.
wants to know what might be driving this change, whether it's environmental, developmental, or habit related, and how best to remove the early morning feed without reinforcing the waking. Oh, it's a
Mm.
double-edged sword, that one, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
you're gonna remove the feed, they're gonna be really wakeful and really cross, but
Yes.
also by having the feed, you're kind of telling their circadian rhythm, "Sure, wake up, there's something
Yeah.
to be had here." You're definitely
Yes.
gonna need to listen to episode, was it 117 on those early risings? But anyway, sorry, Laura,
Yes.
you answered the
That's
question.
okay.
This is
Yeah.
your one. Mm,
So, Minnie, I'd say that as long as there have been no changes in your toddler's health status, it's unlikely that he needs that feed at 4 a.m. His circadian rhythm will be suppressing his appetite overnight. And as long as his weight gain's fine, he's nothing major has happened during the day, then he doesn't need to have that 100 mils. So, I would be thinking, first of all, environmental factors. So check when you're giving your little one dinner. It's not make sure it's not too far away from bedtime, and that the last feed of the night is close to him going into his cot. So that you can reassure yourself that he's not hungry at 4 a.m. This is half the time it's convincing ourselves that we're doing the right thing. So as long as he's having a good dinner and having the last feed of the night relatively close to bedtime, you can be pretty sure he's not going to be hungry at 4 a.m. As we've said before, this is the coldest part of the night, so just checking the room temperature isn't too cold. We are heading, depending on where you are in Australia, if you're in Victoria, we're heading into winter, so it is a bit chilly. So ensuring that that your little one isn't getting too cold, and just checking that there's no noises waking your little one at 4 a.m. And reading through the chapters in Som Bell that talk about troubleshooting those issues. And once we know that those environmental things are taken care of, thinking about your little one's daily rhythm. Has their sleep need changed? Do we need to adjust bedtime so it's a little bit later to help him maintain his sleep until beyond 4 a.m.? And how long the nap is, for example. Do we need to alter the nap duration or nap time? Um, then I'd be thinking about reducing the volume of the bottle over a few nights. So you're only giving them 100 mils at the moment. So maybe bringing it down to, it depends whether this is cow's milk or formula or what you're giving, but reduce it gradually over a few nights until it's virtually nothing. And use a really consistent settling approach in the morning. We can be sure he's not hungry, he's not thirsty because you've given him a sip of water, that the daily rhythm is appropriate for him. And you can just be consistent, boring, and predictable when he wakes up at 4. We know he can resettle himself. And in this way, we're just ensuring that he learns that no, it's not time to wake up. Get and
mm.
resettle him until 6 a.m. or whatever your wake up time is. Yeah, would
Yeah,
you
because
add
his
anything
body's
there?
just yeah, I just think his body's realised there's some calories to be had at 4 a.m., and we just wanna push all the calories back into the daytime again. So,
Mm.
often just really ramping up the foods that they love in the daytime. Like, if they're I know most toddlers absolutely love a hot chippy. Like, maybe we're gonna have a few extra chippies with dinner or something just to
Yes.
really, like, fill those tummies so that's really easy for their
Yes.
body to go, "Oh, we're getting all the calories we need in the daytime."
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe have a really busy, physically active day, so they're going to bed really worn out. That can also really help as well. You just need a couple of
Mm.
nights with no bottle and he'll forget about it
Mhm.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, good luck.
Okay, so Gemma's emailed us. She has a 6-month-old who previously averaged about 12 and a half hours per 24 hours. But over the past week, this has increased to 13 and a half to 14 hours, mainly because she's
Mm,
taking longer day naps. Oh, this is interesting. So
mm.
Gemma wants to know whether it's normal for a baby's sleep need to suddenly increase by 1 to 2 hours in a 24-hour period. Ah, I love this
Yeah,
question.
it's a
Mm,
terrific question. So
mm,
the very first thing you just want to think about is illness. Like, so adding 2 hours of sleep per day consistently, and if your baby's really fatigued, sometimes that's the
mm,
first sign that they're brewing something nasty. So do
mm,
keep that in mind. And if it's, I don't know, if you've got any of those kind of parent gut things where you think is something a little off, get your
mm,
GP to check them out. So absolutely that's the first place my mind goes. But
mm,
look, assuming health is all fine and good,
mhm,
typically we do see it go the other way. So sleep needs do tend to drop off across that first year. But it is possible for an increase to occur. It's just rare. So there's been
mm,
some really fascinating science actually looking at trajectories of total sleep per 24 hours across that first year. And there
mhm,
are some babies that start low and gradually kind of
mm.
increase. They're definitely not in the majority though. So
No.
don't get your hopes up, listeners. But there are some, which is why we always say if things are going well, but you think, oh, they're a bit tired, add a bit more sleep in.
Yes.
I also think Gemma should be just checking that their baby isn't entering a cycle where, and I've seen this, you probably do too, Laura, quite often, where some babies will begin to have like 3 or 4 days with heaps of sleep. So they overshoot their sleep need. And then it's
Mm,
followed by 3 or 4 of the worst days where they're waking
yeah.
all the time. They're really undershooting that sleep average.
Mm,
So it's a bit of a seesaw up and down. The
mm.
average is in the middle. I don't know why I'm using my hands for a podcast, but our 10 YouTube subscribers will love it. It's more than
Yes.
10, maybe there's, yeah, 30 or something. But there's that average and they're kind of overshooting it, undershooting it, overshooting it, undershooting it. I would keep an
Yes.
eye on what the average kind of sits on over the next few weeks, Gemma. And if they are cycling like that, which is a roller coaster for parents, just go,
Mm,
okay, we're picking that midpoint. We're going to
mhm.
work towards a steady daily rhythm that centers on that. So yeah, it's great. And I've got everything crossed for you, Gemma, that this is just an increase in sleep needs and you can
Yes.
enjoy those long day naps because that is like the holy grail of early parenthood, I reckon.
It is long day naps. I love it. I am always just so hopeful. I'm ever the optimist for
Mm,
parents who have lower sleep need babies that maybe this one is going to be in that little group that does have an
yeah.
uptick. And you and I are always talking about when you've had 1 or 2 weeks of really excellent sleep, then take your foot off the brake,
Yes.
add a bit more in, because I'm always just so
Yeah.
excited in case this is one of the babies that does end up needing more sleep than their starting point indicated. So let us know,
Mm.
Gemma. We'll be really keen to hear if this is
Yeah.
a real increase.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. All right. Cassie sent in a question. Cassie has a 6.5-month-old with a very low sleep need, currently only 10 hours, 45 minutes per 24 hours. She
Mm,
aims for approximately 1 hour, 45 minutes of day sleep and 9 hours overnight, with one night feed and a 6 a.m. wake up time. He typically falls asleep after 3 hours awake in the morning for a 60-minute nap, then struggles to stay awake for the next wake window, often napping again around 12 or 1 p.m. for a second nap. Cassie caps that nap at 45 minutes. This leads
mm,
to a very long final wake window, and
mm,
he has difficulty reaching his 8:30 p.m. bedtime. He's also
mm,
prone to falling asleep during feeds and in the car. When his day sleep exceeds 2 hours, he wakes more overnight and has more false starts. Cassie has used the quick fade approach since he was 4 months old, but he still relies on hands on support unless he's extremely tired. He can resettle independently overnight at times. Cassie wants to know how to better optimize his daily rhythm to keep him comfortably awake during the day while maintaining enough sleep pressure for more settled nights. Oh, this is a hard one to answer without a
yeah, it
sleep
is.
diary, but take it away, Laura.
It is, yeah,
Good luck.
Cassie. I would actually love to
Yeah.
have a clinic session with you because,
Yeah.
yeah, this is this is tricky. What I would be thinking about is first of all, acknowledging it's really hard when you have such a low sleep needs baby to get the daily rhythm
Mm.
right. And you're walking a tightrope that parents of high sleep needs babies never have to walk. And it's hard because you are recognizing that if your baby has more day sleep than 2 hours, the nights fall over.
Mm.
Um, from what you're describing, your 6.5-month-old is sometimes awake for about 7 hours um, between the end of end of the second nap and bedtime. So I'm not surprised that he's prone to falling asleep in the car and during feeds. What I would be tempted to do, there's a couple of options, and I think one is probably going to be quite controversial. I'll be keen to hear what you think, Fallon.
Mm.
I would be wondering whether it would be worth returning to 3 short naps a day to break up that
Yeah.
last long wake window. So thinking 3 naps each of about 1 sleep cycle each, whatever that is. Um,
Mm.
so, if they're 45 minutes, then it might be 3 45-minute naps, which does take them slightly over the 2 hours, but then just adjust bedtime or wake up. Alternatively, if you went to 2 naps because having the 3 was causing big problems with settling at night, the other way to go would be to keep the naps as you already have them, but to add a power nap later on in the afternoon to
Mm.
support him until bedtime, and then it's not a whole sleep cycle, but it just it creates that bridge in that long awake time before
Mm.
bed. Now, parents, if the reason I said I'd love to see you in the clinic is that often when I present a couple of options like that are a little bit away from the norm or the more generic advice we provide in the podcast, is that parents, I can just see in their face which way would suit them
Yeah.
best, because there's like a
I totally
horrified
agree.
look.
Yeah,
Yeah,
parents will know.
they know.
And you and I
Yeah,
cannot know, but the parent
no.
knows which one their child is gonna
Yes.
manage. Yeah.
Yeah, and they'll just go, "Absolutely not. A power nap is like, this baby can
Kryptonite.
run." Yeah, it's kryptonite. Yeah, and they won't be asleep
Yeah.
until 11. And then I go, "Right,
Mm.
that's the option that we're not gonna do, in which case let's do 3 short naps instead." Um,
Mm.
so have a think, Cassie. How did you respond to both of those options, and trust your gut with which way you go? Um,
Yeah.
what did you think about? What would you be thinking, one or the
I
other of
think they're
those
both
options, or something
really
else?
yeah, I think they're both really valid options. And I wouldn't be entirely led by parent reaction in this case for sure. I just feel like it's cases like this where we're talking very low sleep needs and you're really seeing a lot of fatigue. I would, and I know you've already made a note of this on the run sheet, Laura, but I just think these are the cases where I'm like, right, we urgently have to get to independent settling because this could be a
Mm.
child who learns to completely self settle. So, like, Cassie's a really good part of the way there. But yeah, get your hands
Mm.
off him now. You've done a lot of padding. He's really used to the cot. He sometimes self settles. Let's make
Yeah.
it always self settles because sometimes they do add a bit more sleep. And I
Mm.
bet Cassie would love it if that happened. So I'd
Yes.
probably prioritize that as well as, yeah, considering the tweaks to the daily rhythm.
Yeah. So work through the next steps, Cassie, on the quick fade approach, or if you're feeling like you want to change how you're settling him because you've been using that quick fade for quite a few months now, then switch to the supported accelerated approach. And
Mm,
book in for a coaching call if you want to discuss that with either Fallon or myself. Good luck.
yeah, for sure.
Now, is this our last question? Oh gosh, we better hurry up. We've got quite a few more to go,
I know,
Fallon.
there's
I thought
still
we were doing really
heaps.
well. Oh my God. Okay.
Right, the skates are
Every
on.
week we say we're going to be quick. And we're not. Okay, so
Uh,
let's get on to Hannah's question. So Hannah has a 7-month-old who now wakes twice overnight for feeds and otherwise self-settles, following previous guidance that we've given her, including transitioning to 2 naps. So well done, Hannah. She's aiming for around 2 hours of day sleep and approximately 10 hours 15 overnight. Hannah finds it difficult to keep him awake during feeds and car rides, and she wants to know whether this is normal or a sign that she needs to adjust his day or night sleep. She also asks for guidance on how to handle sleep when he's unwell. He currently has a cold and seems more tired, and she is unsure whether to offer additional sleep freely or to maintain usual limits to avoid disrupting the nights.
Great question. Look, I would say to begin with, if he's feeding back to sleep overnight, then it's
Mm,
pretty normal that they tend to drift off really easily during daytime feeds because your baby's got a bit of an association between feeding and falling asleep because that's what
mm,
happens overnight. So that can just mean, yeah, daytime, big struggle to keep them awake during
mm,
feeds. So you could look at just making sure he's going back in the cot awake after the overnight feeds, and then you might find that that association kind of wears off a bit, and then
mm.
he's more wakeful during the daytime. It can also help just to make sure those day feeds are in a brightly lit room. Maybe you've got the TV on or some music, or
Yeah.
just a bit of energy going on can really help to avoid that drowsiness
Mm,
and help that day rhythm come together. And then in terms of the illness, so for, just your common head cold, I probably wouldn't adapt the daily rhythm by much, maybe not even at all. I think if it's a
mm,
fairly minor illness and they seem a little bit more tired, maybe you just give 30 minutes extra day sleep
mm.
and see how they go. If it destroys their nights, well, the next day, don't do that.
Yes.
They're taking 30 minutes more sleep in the day, but they've decided to be awake for 30 minutes longer overnight.
Yes.
It's kind of tipping them too far out of balance. But for more serious illnesses, they genuinely tend to need more sleep to recover, much like as adults, we tend to sleep
Mhm.
more when we're really sick. So in that case, you might let him nap for a little bit longer, but you really only parents can decide how much longer is sensible. So,
Yes.
a 4-hour day nap might be way too much. And, then you're going to have a terrible night. And then you're still parenting a sick child in the day, but you've got this
Yeah.
horrible interrupted night behind you.
Mm,
So I think I can't give you a perfect answer, Hannah. It sort of depends what's making them unwell and how unwell they are. But
mm.
hopefully that gives you just a bit of guidance to think about whether you should, allow a whole extra hour or even extra 2 hours, or if it's just, 15 minutes more. Um,
Yes.
is that what you'd say, Laura?
Yeah, I'd say so. And we do have podcast episodes on
Mm.
protecting sleep during sickness. So have a look at our back catalogue. And there is one relatively recently that's called Protecting Sleep During Sickness or Illness. So
Yes, and
we
we have a
talk about it
lesson
in a
in
bit more
Sunbell on
detail.
that too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So check
Yeah,
out
we
those
do.
resources in Sunbell as well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Good.
All right. Sarah has a 16-month-old with an approximate 12 and a half hour sleep need. They sleep 8 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. with a 2-hour daytime nap. He
Hmm.
has settled independently in his cot since 4 months of age, with only occasional extra support during illness or teething.
Hmm.
Following a recent teething period where Sarah held him to sleep, he's now refusing to settle in the cot. Oh, he's
Oh.
realised there's other ways of falling asleep, hasn't he?
Yeah,
Oh
yes.
dear. So Sarah says
Oh.
he's becoming very distressed when she places
Oh.
him down, standing and crying until she picks him up. He calms immediately when she holds him and falls asleep quickly in her arms. When she tries in cot support, sitting in a chair or checking in on him, sort of coming and going, she says his distress escalates. He settles without issue for naps at other carers' homes. Oh, there's a clue
Mm.
there.
Yeah.
Sarah wants to know how to transition back to cot settling using a gentler approach and what steps exist between holding him to sleep and independent cot settling whilst avoiding reinforcing the current pattern.
Oh,
This is a meaty one.
so tricky. Yes. So, Sarah, it can be really hard when you have had a baby who has settled independently for a year, that would be, and now things have fallen over. It can be really hard when you then see crying and protesting at bedtime when you haven't seen that for since they were very, very small. And it can be
Mm.
really challenging then to stick with one predictable way of settling, where you're not responding straight away with that protesting behavior. Sometimes when I'm working with families who have those families who are so used to having really cranky children with just slightly difficult temperaments, they're just like, oh, well, he cries anyway, doesn't matter. They don't mind, a bit of crying because it is just the soundtrack of their lives. But when you have parents who have really chilled,
Mm,
easygoing temperament babies, any crying often has only ever happened before because there's been something actually wrong that the parents have to intervene for. I'm not surprised, Sarah, that it is hard when you've tried to use in-cot support to persist, because this hasn't been something that you've had to do. And that distress that you're witnessing is really hard to tolerate and manage. Now, if you want to go with a really gentle approach, then I would be looking at the slow fade approach, Sarah, which is about introducing some associations to your toddler whilst you're holding him in your arms, with the petting and humming, and then very gradually using those same new associations when you put him down into the cot or bed, presumably a cot at this age. Um, that would be the most gradual approach that you could take. Um, it Some toddlers will tolerate it, and others will not. It really will depend on your toddler's temperament. Um, but that would be the most gradual way. So I would read that handout and see how you think your little one is going to react. I would be thinking through how you yourself are responding to, like, emotionally responding to his protest, um, and what you can do to protect yourself. So that might be listening to music through headphones to keep yourself calm and grounded. What we know is that some toddlers, when they have, in a way, tasted the good life, which your toddler has recently, and developed that strong preference for wanting this new being held to sleep, will really protest loudly at any change, because they're toddlers and this is what toddlers do. And so
mm,
it will be important to you to do a bit of a check on how you're feeling emotionally, and understanding why this protest is happening. It's not necessarily because he's upset and distressed, it's because he wants you to do something different and he's cross or angry or frustrated that you're not settling him in that way. So, if you're feeling really spent emotionally, maybe it's something that is now not is not the time to do, to make the changes. But if you feel that you can understand why he's having this big protest and you're happy to continue to do a really gentle approach to settle him whilst respecting his big emotions about it, but also respecting your wish to continue to go back to where you were before, then keep going. Just know that his protest isn't because you're doing anything wrong. His protest is because he would prefer you to settle him in a way that doesn't suit you. One way that could make it a little bit easier to settle him, to change the way that you're settling him at the moment, would be to consider shortening that nap to an hour and a half rather than 2 hours, just so that you can drive up that sleep pressure by bedtime. And just changing that ratio of day to nighttime sleep can sometimes help toddlers respond a little bit more easily to a change in how their parents settle them to sleep. So that's also something to consider. But
mm.
again, if you were in clinic, I would be looking at your face to see your response to that. And if you're like, no way, then don't do that. But it's just something to keep in mind. Anything that
Yeah.
you would add, Fallon?
Well, I've been sitting here thinking that there could be a creative way to make this a whole lot easier on Sarah. And one of the thoughts I
Uh,
had is, if at other caregivers' houses, he self settles and it's fine, then he's really learnt that at home, if I kick up a big stink, I get held to sleep. if it's possible, like say if at Nana's house he self-settles fine there, then ask Nana to come over and do a couple of bedtimes if it's possible.
Mm.
And maybe she uses something like if he normally settles quickly for her, it could be using something like the advanced accelerated approach where she just goes in, says, "Good night, mate," does a few pats and has a good night phrase, and then she wanders out of the room and just waits and kind of sees, what he does. He might settle really quickly because it's Nana. And then after a couple of nights, you go in and you just do the exact same thing that Nana did. He probably will
Mhm.
still kick up a bit of a stink, but he's realized, okay, at home, when I'm in my bedroom, in my environment, I actually can and do fall asleep in my own cot. So it could
Yes.
just be a good way of like maybe getting a bit of faster progress. Something to think
Yes.
about because I think he's like, no, I want mum, and I'm gonna get
Yes.
really furious, and she's gonna change her mind.
Yes, yeah, and actually, I
Oh,
love
toddlers are
that idea,
clever.
Fallon, and maybe even, 1 or 2 nights with Nana doing it, and then on the 3rd night, um, Sarah going in every other time at the end of each interval. So Nana
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
in, then wakes, then Mum goes in, and then Nana goes in and Mum goes in, so that,
Mm.
he sees, "Oh, they're doing it exactly the
Yeah,
same
it
way
doesn't matter
together."
who
Mhm.
settles me because it goes the same
Yeah,
way every time.
yeah,
Yeah, because we know he can self-settle. He's just,
yeah,
yeah, got strong opinions like what toddler doesn't?
yeah. That's right.
Mm.
Okay, now we've got a question from Bryony, who has a 12-month-old who previously cot settled well, but following illness and sickness began feeding to sleep and co-sleeping for part of the night. Oh, I think this might be quite similar to Sarah's predicament. After night
Mm.
weaning, which did not reduce his night waking, she started using the quick fade approach to reintroduce cot settling. He has shown some progress overnight, but at times becomes extremely distressed during settles, crying intensely and gagging. Oh dear. Bryony provides brief in cot support before picking him up to resettle when he begins gagging, then returns him to the cot once he is calm. She wants to know whether this level of distress is typical when reteaching cot settling and how best to manage the process. Oh,
Mm.
gosh, that's me too.
Yeah, it gets
Mm,
really hard to work on cot settling as babies get older, that's for sure. So it is pretty normal to
yeah.
see a lot of pushback. Doesn't
Mm,
mean we can't do anything about it though. So 100% check the daily rhythm because really long night settles often do indicate that there could be a bit of a sleep pressure component there. Maybe they're ready to drop to one nap or something like that. So definitely address that first.
mm.
Toddlers have such good memories. They're like, yeah, I often think about how, well, this is probably a very specific one for dog owners, but if your dog, you take them for a walk and one day in this particular bush, someone's dropped a packet of chips and they get those chips. And then for like months afterwards, your dog is going to insist on very closely inspecting this magical bush that once produced hot chippies. Look, it's like a
Yeah,
funny example, but I just
yeah,
think, toddlers are learning and noticing these things. So when we go to make a change, we really have to be prepared to persist and show them that this
yeah.
is the approach that I'm sticking to. With that quick fade approach, that means you're giving constant hands-on support. You're constantly present, um, and it can mean that sometimes the night waking just doesn't reduce until you've phased out the patting and shushing. Some toddlers will still
Mhm,
spring awake at the end of the next sleep cycle, going, "Where are you? Why aren't you patting
mm.
me? Why aren't you shushing?" Toddlers have no idea that we actually need to sleep overnight as well. They just expect that we'll still be there all night long,
Yeah,
hovering over the cot.
yeah.
So it might be worth phasing out the padding and the shushing, when you
Mm,
can. And also sometimes it's just too much hands-on support. So for some parents, I'll say, look, I know it seems really unlikely that wandering away is going to actually help. But for some toddlers, if we just say, oh, I'm just going to go do this thing, I'll be back in a minute, they then with you out of sight and out of mind, start to use their self-soothing abilities,
mm.
because they're like, "Well, you're not here. I'll give it a go." And then that's when we
Yes.
see a bit of progress. So we wanna perfect the daily rhythm first, but then have a think about, where you're up to with the, settling. Make sure the parental bed is absolutely out of sight. If they're still in your
Mm,
room, very hard to convince them they shouldn't be able to jump out and get into your bed, whereas if they're
yeah.
in their own room and the parent bed's out of sight, it is a bit easier.
Mm,
And if you are a breastfeeding parent, then it's really important that the other caregiver, if you have one, or other friends or family who are happy to support you, they should do the overnight settles because it's
mhm.
just very triggering. If they
Yes.
can see the boobs, they want the boobs. So let's make sure
Yes.
they don't see the boobs.
Yes, absolutely. And I think some of those points are really going to be valid for Sarah as well, who we just spoke about
Mm,
earlier. Yeah. So good
yeah.
luck, Bryony. It sounds really tricky, but yeah, getting that daily rhythm right and trying to stop the hands-on support as soon as you can. That's going to be the key to
Yeah.
improving things again.
Yeah. You'll get through this. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All
Uh,
right. Emily emailed in. She has a 3-week-old, wow, tiny one, 3-week-old born at
yeah.
41 weeks who is very alert, averaging 5.5 hours of day sleep across 3 long naps and nine and
Uh-huh.
a half hours overnight, with wake windows of around an hour and a half. His days and nights are becoming less confused as Emily uses consistent morning wake times and gentle nap capping. Yes, go
Yes.
Emily.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Well done. That's
Yeah.
music to my ears.
Yeah.
Emily says the main challenge is that he does not transfer well to the bassinet. He springs awake immediately or soon after she transfers him, regardless of how settled he appears beforehand. Emily wants to know whether he is too young for consistent cot settling, when is it appropriate to start practicing versus committing to cot settling for every sleep, and what the best approach is for a baby who is difficult to transfer.
Oh, well done, Emily. And you were just right at the beginning of this with a tiny little
Mm,
baby. So, like, congratulations on his birth and well done for helping him out of that day night confusion. That's brilliant. At this age, it is appropriate to practice putting him down into the bassinet before he's fully asleep. That's absolutely fine to do this. You're describing him as super alert. So
mm,
he's really looking at what's going on around him. And if he's falling asleep in your arms, maybe he's just more alert than many other babies his age. And so when you pop him down in the bassinet, he's going, oh, what's going on? Um,
mm,
so have a go at popping him down, and seeing what happens. So putting him down
mm,
before he's asleep. Have a look at the slow tapered approach. That's our most gradual approach and is appropriate at this age. You also don't have to be 100% committed at this young age to using that approach every single settle. You're doing it's 3 long naps across the day, and then bedtime and resettles overnight. So thinking about maybe picking a couple of naps in a day, 1 or 2 naps in the day, where you attempt to put him down before he's fully asleep, and then you're padding him in the bassinet, and taking your hand off sometimes just to see what he does. Everything's new for all of, like, for both of you, for the whole family at this point. So you might find that you pop him down when he's just shows those first tired signs. You pop him down and you just walk away, just to tidy up some clothes or something, and you turn back and he's fallen asleep in the bassinet. We never
mm,
know. And don't be put off doing that because you've seen something on social media saying you mustn't put your baby down.
mm.
Give it a go and see. Um,
Yeah, it's all about having a bit of a practice, sussing out what
yes,
works, what doesn't. And I always say to parents, you got to remember that parents of, well, sometimes twins, triplets, certainly quads, they can't be held for every nap. So they are,
no,
they're fully committed to cot or bassinet settling from day one.
yes,
Nobody's broken. Everybody's okay. Babies go,
yes,
oh, okay, this is where I sleep. All right. So
yep,
it really is up to parents whether you want to go all in on cot settling always, but for whatever reasons you want to, or just see how they go. I would just say that at this age they enter sleep through light sleep, and that's why even when he's seeming really asleep, they can wake really easily on transfer because they're having the deeper stages of sleep actually towards the end of the sleep cycle, and
yes,
that all shifts at about 12 weeks of age. So that's why it can be a bit tricky at this age. But I think, Emily, you're
yes.
off to a brilliant start.
Yeah, well done. Okay, we're getting near the end. Oh, this is the last one. Christine is lucky
It
last.
is.
Okay, so Christine has an almost 8-month-old with an approximate 12-hour sleep need, averaging 1 to 2 hours of day sleep and around 10 hours overnight with a 7:30 bedtime. He has improved significantly since starting the program and now only wakes to be resettled, which usually takes Christine a few minutes, just once overnight. However, from around 3 or 4:30 a.m. onwards, he's very difficult to resettle and often stays awake until she feeds him, after which he is still then fully awake. She suspects he may
Mm,
be an early riser. She wants to know what she can do to improve settling in the early morning hours, whether his day sleep may be contributing, and whether sleep needs can increase as a baby gets older. Okay, so see earlier,
mm.
see earlier conversation.
Yeah, look, I
Mm,
think Christine, definitely have a listen to our last episode, episode 117, because that was all about what to do about early rising, and that'll take you through a bunch of different factors to consider. Look, I think there probably is a need to adapt the daily rhythm a little bit just to ensure the sleep
mm,
pressure's really there until morning.
mm,
And then when go to really work on resettling, you're likely to see a bit more progress. Um, and like we discussed earlier, sleep needs can increase with age, but it's not the usual. So generally um, we see the best progress when we just really cater to the sleep average that they do manage to achieve. And
mm,
of course, then if you have a couple of weeks that are going, really, really well, you're really happy, you've achieved like really good nights, but you think they need a bit more sleep, trial adding in that little bit of sleep. Maybe it's 15-minute longer sleeping in the morning, for example, and do that for a week and see, do they actually take
mm,
it? Or do they just get more wakeful at other times of day and they're not actually increasing how much sleep they have overall? So you definitely can have a bit of an experiment there. But
mm.
again, I mean, I say this every week, I sound like a broken record, but thank you for these amazing questions from parents. They are a great bunch of questions. And I can just imagine a lot of parents listening in and going, oh, okay, that's sort of similar to my baby or my toddler. And yeah, I hope you found this episode really helpful.
Yeah.
Of course, we've poured everything into Sunbell, and there's a lot more information in Sunbell than we could ever touch on in the podcast. So, if you're having trouble, with your child having false starts or other sort of sleep pressure related difficulties or settling difficulties, consider joining. If you're already a member and you're struggling, please book a coaching call. Some problems are just a bit tricky, and a bit of
Mm,
enhanced support goes a really long way to getting you over the line. So you just have a good
yeah.
sleeper going forward and you can put all the sleep woes behind you.
Yes.
Um, if you prefer working one on one, of course, Laura, you're in the clinic, the
Mhm,
Victorian Children's Clinic in Malvern. You could book in with Laura for a longer appointment and have that one-on-one support. We also do telehealth, and we have a team of practitioners. We've got Callie, who's
mhm.
an OT. We've got Kat, who's a children's nurse, and we've got Lauren, who is a nurse as well. So they all have their own really amazing, unique skill sets to bring to every
Mhm.
appointment. So you can go and have a read about each of our practitioners online and decide who might be the right fit for you. And lastly, if you love this episode, please leave us a review, give us a 5-star rating, hit subscribe, buy us a cuppa. It all really,
Yeah.
really helps to keep this work going when you guys spread the love. So thanks, guys, for tuning in, and you'll hear from us in another couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.